He also literally would be at the office at his desk by 4:30 in the morning every day. And he always used to say it's easy to look smart if you have a several hour head start on everyone else.
Nobody knows what they're doing. We are all figuring it out as we go.
That was the thing for me at Bain. And you work with these big fancy companies and you're like, you guys have no idea what you're doing. And that's very freeing. My only real advice is write publicly. Someone's like, I want to work at a venture fund. I'm like, cool, what have you written? If you can't write the check, write me the thesis and timestamp it. If you can't write, you can't think.
You know, my dad still remains like the primary influence in my life. And I know that your dad was that for you. I read this cool story about him. So maybe you can go deeper on this. So he became the youngest ever partner at Morgan Stanley.
Yep.
And he actually wrote in his book, which is called Lessons. It's like it's really just about life lessons that I think everybody would get value out of reading. All the money that's made from it is also donated to charity, which is really cool. But he wrote that he learned to ballroom dance when he was young, and that actually helped him earn the summer internship job at Morgan Stanley. Can you tell me more about your dad and his, I think, different way to view the world and what you learned from him growing up?
Yeah, I mean, that's a broad question. The answer is my dad was, as he said, a really important character in my life. I think of him often. He died way too young at 56. But we spent a lot of great time together. And he had a wild career. He used to refer to himself. Have you ever seen a movie called Being There?
No.
It's great. You should watch it. It's with this character named Chauncey the Gardener, and the idea is that he's this incredible character, almost Forrest Gump like character. It's almost like this was Forrest Gump before Forrest Gump, just kind of living his life and wandering into like the most interesting scenarios and situations. So my dad's doing ballroom dancing, and you have to understand he's a brilliant guy. He's also somewhat of a character. He went to Harvard undergrad. He kind of, I think even that book says, didn't grow up wealthy, wasn't poor, but didn't grow up, particularly wealthy. His joke was, which I think was basically true, he couldn't get dates. And so he was looking for a way to kind of do something different to distinguish himself, and ended up going and learning ballroom dance with a bunch of 70-year-olds and got really excited about ballroom dance and did that. And, then he went to interview for investment banking jobs. And, he basically got rejected from all the investment banks except for the most prestigious one, which was Morgan Stanley. And they liked that he was a character, that he had gone off and done this independent. This was before kids were entrepreneurs. He actually hilariously in college, believe it or not, was trying to earn money, and he started using an early computer matching rides between Boston and New York for people who wanted to ride share. So he was doing all sorts of crazy stuff as a kid, just kind of experimenting and learning, and he found his way into Wall Street that way.
Wow. What are one or two of your favorite learnings that you picked up, whether from reading his work or from him directly?
I mean, it's really, really hard, to compress it down. But what I'd say honestly is, I think there are two things that come to mind. One is the guy worked unbelievably hard, right? For all like the brilliance, and he was a brilliant man and a real innovator, and he came up with a lot of amazing stuff. And really, he was a pioneer on Wall Street in a lot of ways. He also literally would be at the office at his desk by like 4:30 in the morning every day. And he always used to say it's easy to look smart if you have a several hour head start on everyone else, right? Wow. And so I do think that a lot of success does come down to just like being willing to do the work. And I think he did that in a big way. So that's one. The thing is, I just remember a lot of like joy and excitement about new ideas and information. When he was a banker, he kind of invented this idea of transaction development. This was like in the earliest days of private equity existing. And he was the youngest ever MD, and he was kind of like he was kind of doing his thing, but he had no book of business, and so he kind of started pitching these baby new firms like KKR ideas, because he had to figure out how to drum up business for himself. He became I think for a long time was the highest earning banker, or whatever the numbers are. They're in the book. But the upshot is he literally just like kind of finds his way, because I think he actually truly loved the people and ideas. And I think that carried into his venture. He got really excited with the internet very early, and he used to joke that he was the largest angel investor on the East Coast for many years, which was, as he used to say, kind of like being the smartest utilities executive, which means nothing because the East Coast is relevant, but like he was the largest. And like I just remember going to meetings with him and he would take me and like his joy and excitement at the journey. And I think, just making sure you enjoy the journey, um, work hard. It's like this stuff isn't rocket science. But I just remember a lot of joy, and I think that's important.
There are trade-offs to excellence. Being at the office at 4:30 means you're not home with your family having breakfast. What do you think about working extremely hard and the trade-offs that it takes in order to do some, we'll get to your story in a second, but to do some of the things you've done, it takes it's a sacrifice. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, it's funny. It happened to, really have. It's funny you brought up his book. I've obviously read it a few times and you kind of quote out of it. But his joke in the book is it. He did make it home for his kids and he worked, but he wasn't there for his marriage, and like it led to his divorce because he was, and that's he has a very honest story about this stuff. So I think there's no question there are trade-offs. I think on these things. Look, I think the thing I would keep in mind is there are seasons for everything.
Mm-hmm.
You can't work a bajillion hours a week all the time for your whole life. You'll hate your life. And it's also just not possible. And I think you have to think about seasons. So, my dad would say, since you bring him up and we're talking about him, like, you know, either be early or be late. Don't be on time. Right. And like, he'd talk about how his thing was he started his career super early. He started working at Morgan Stanley before he actually graduated from Harvard. He literally just showed up and started working. And again, what he says in the book is that gave him a several month head start on all the other associates, which meant he knew the partners better, which meant he just like worked hard and showed up first and early every time, right? And like that was a strategy. And then candidly, later in his life, he didn't. He'd go over the River Washington Bridge after rush hour, right? And I think there's another strategy, which is enjoy your 20s and then work really hard later. But I think it's like it's not one of those things where like it's so binary. I think there's seasons for it. And one thing I'll say as someone who invests in entrepreneurs, I think a lot about this, which is people talk about is that a great person, right? And I actually don't think that's the right question. The right question is it the right person at the right moment to be successful? Because no one is always there. People who get rich and lazy, or they have other things going on in their life, or there's all sorts of factors at play. And I think really the psychology of who makes a good founder and who can put in the work and who's ready to joyfully do it are really important factors to think about.
Not to jump ahead too far, but you just mentioned it, so I'll go there and then we'll go back. You make strategic bets. That's part of your job. There's another way of phrasing what you do, or at least one of the things you do. You got to bet on people, you got to bet on ideas, or the combination of those things. What do you look for in a founder specifically? Let's talk about the person right now. What are you looking for in people you're like, I'm pushing my chips behind them, right? I'm going to bet on them. What are some of the must-haves in those people?
You know, there's a bunch of things. I think one is I'm going to use the word joy. I think you want joyful people,
Mm.
right? And people who are going to be joyful in what they're doing. And I just don't think that in the long run, angry people win. And I think that the reality is that there are exceptions to that. There always, one of the things you have to understand in venture capital, especially what I do, is I'm usually wrong. You're just looking for marginal pattern advantages, right? If that makes sense, right? And so I'd say like you want to bet on people who are going to be joyful in what they're doing. And again, this is why I'm so obsessed with it. It's not about great people, bad people. It's about right person, right opportunity at the right time. All those things aligning. And so for me, it's like, look, when people come in and you can tell their genuine belief and excitement about what they're doing. When you ask them, why are you doing this? And they have a really compelling answer, right, about why this is something that they find joy in and they care about so much. I mean, you step back in business, and most of the time when people are pitching you companies, they're so fucking boring, right? Like you're like, this is sinful. You might even be right. It's just boring. And then you say to yourself, your life is short. Is this really what you're spending your time on? Right? And if you can have that honest conversation, the person says, no, 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 you don't understand. This is why this is joy for me. This is why it matters. I think these are really important things. I mean, there are other things that come to play, like entrepreneurs chronically, I do this myself. You always think it's going to be easier than it is, right? It's really hard. And so you do need people who are going to persevere and find joy. And I mean, have you ever heard the term like type 2 fun, right? You ever heard that term?
What
So
is
there's
it?
like
No.
type 1 fun is a thing that's like actually fun when you're doing it, right? Like, I don't know, like a roller coaster or I don't know, whatever, skiing. Type 2 fun is something that like completely sucks while you're doing it, but there's joy on the other side. Like climbing a mountain. Like no one likes climbing mountains. You like having climbed a mountain or like running an ultra marathon. And so I do think that people who have experience with type 2 fun, right, and can enjoy the pain, right? Like suffer like they think that is a part of what the joy has to be. But yeah, I think that's like kind of what I've been thinking a lot about recently. And I think about the things that I've been most excited about or been most proud of in my career, you know, they've all had moments of terrible feeling. Like there are moments where you're like, this is the worst, right? Like no story, almost no story in history has been a straight line success. There's always been moments of total disaster and fear and scared and all those bad feelings. But you look back on them and like you're like, that was a joyful startup, right?
Hmm.
That was those people were joyful. The approach, like, it was a fun thing, and I think that's honestly what I look for more and more. Not because like it's just nice and pleasant, but it is. But honestly, because I think it correlates with success.
Yeah. Usually all of the greatest moments when I look back at my life were preceded by something really hard, whether it's preparation, getting ready for a sporting event, writing a book or books, right? It's a lot of like, I mean, I'm literally right in the middle of this right now. It's a lot of questioning and hating yourself. I mean, this sucks so bad. And then you got to keep going, right? You got to make it better. You got to keep after it. Do you have an example of a time when you're like, oh my God, the world's falling apart. This is terrible. I'm terrible. And then you kind of came through it out the other side.
It's interesting when you say that. Here's the honest reaction I have, Ryan, which is, yeah, there's countless examples from business and life. But you know what? I think there's this thing about practicing these experiences that's really important. And I really believe that like sports are a really important part of this. So I'll give you an example. Like last year, I've always been like a reasonably fast runner, but never a serious runner. And last year, for complicated reasons, I ended up with this like random goal, which was to run a sub 3 hour marathon, right? And, you know, this is not like there's no point to this goal, right? Like I'm now 42, then 41. Like I'm not the fastest guy in the world. I'm fit enough. Like there's no point, right? But I was like, goals are important and like practice is important and practice and pain and perseverance is important. It was funny because I would say that the last few miles of that, I ended up doing it. I ran a 2:59, like 38. I made it by like 20 seconds. But like, I was talking to someone recently. It's like the last 6 miles of that race was a deep conversation with God, right? Because you can stop at any moment. Like, and by the way, like training for this is like, there's no stakes. No one's watching. No one cares. Like, you're the only one that cares about this. But honestly, like finishing that and getting it done, even though it's very painful, right? And like, and I did it, without a lot of training and the whole 9 yards. Those are the types of like practice moments where like, this is a disaster. I am literally like falling apart. And then it's worth it for the payoff and for the practice. 2 years ago, one of my challenges was to like get my pilot's license, right? And like there are people who love flying airplanes, right? Like I know people who have gotten super into it and like this is an important part of their identity and like it's like they geek out about the whole. I don't love it. It's fine. It's fine. But like I set the goal. I actually find it like somewhat. I would definitely have moments where I was like, this is really scary. Like especially when you do your like first solo in an airplane or like things like that. And you're like, this is like pretty terrifying, honestly. But on the other side of actually accomplishing the goal, it becomes these practices you do, which then you bring into the rest of your life, so that when shit hits the fan with partners, with a deal, with some stupid shit, you're like, I know these feelings, right? I know how to think about it. And, I can kind of move forward, as opposed to fall apart.
Those lessons, whether it's from sports or physically punishing yourself, like trying to finish a marathon under 3 hours, which is amazing, I think they're so portable. You're creating evidence for yourself that you can do something really hard. When like no one else, especially in a marathon, yeah, everyone's worried about themselves. They don't care about you. Like maybe a few people that love you, but other than that, that's it. So it's really all about you proving to yourself and creating that evidence so that when you face the next hard thing, whether it's in business or in a relationship or all of the above, you have that evidence to point back to. So I've done this before, not like this exact thing, but a version of this. I can do this. I think exceptional leaders, people who have sustained excellence over time, the 650 plus I've talked to over the past decade, Sam, are really good at this.
Yeah.
They're really good at putting themselves in the pain cave and getting out regularly. And they
Yeah.
intentionally do it. They manufacture hardship so that in the future, they're better prepared to handle the inevitable adversity that they're going to face. And this just seems to be a commonality I've seen.
I think it's the only thing you practice. It's
Yeah.
your point. And like, the nice part is, if you look at like most professionals were like, there was just a great, my kids are really into Carlos Alcaraz, right? Versus Sinner, right? These are the kind of
Yeah.
that one and two. These are going to be the two best tennis players in the next decade, right? And it's really fun to watch them. And it's funny because one, you see in Alcaraz, the first thing I was talking about, which is joy. Like this guy loves, I mean, you can just see he is exuding joy. And I think that is an important thing. Like he'll be successful as tennis because he freaking loves it. But
Yeah.
then the other thing to your point is like, that like part of the reason these guys, I believe, are going to dominate tennis so much is like once you get in a position where you're getting experience winning, it compounds, right? Because like when you're, down two sets in a final and you're like, I've been here. Like I
Hmm.
can come back from this. Like that so much of these things are mental. And so however you're figuring out to practice it, right, I think are important. I mean, for me, it was, I think running has been an important part, even though I've never been that serious. Even back to high school, the like purity of racing and pain and running, I think has actually been an incredibly important set of lessons for me, right? That you kind of carry forward. And I will say, like, it's not a deal breaker for me, but when you kind of are looking for leaders in companies, the evidence that they've gotten through, that they enjoy the process, that they can embrace the suck, so to speak. And it's not just like you embrace it and suffer through it, but it's like you actually kind of love it, right? I think is, again, these are all correlations and there are always exceptions, but I kind of think it's important, right?
In the summer here in Ohio, where I live, it gets super hot and muggy. But when I go on my walks, I want to wear long sleeves, long pants, and a weighted vest because I think you need to suffer, right? Like you got to regularly suffer in doing that. It's like, I'm not hot. Like we're not complaining about air conditioning in the car. That's a rule for me. Like I'm not listening to that. We're not to my kids. We're not complaining about air conditioning in the car. Like sometimes we need
By
to
the way, they're going to
suffer.
write a book about that someday, and like, their dad wouldn't let them turn the air conditioning on. But
I
yeah,
still
like,
turn it on. I turn it on, but sometimes they get to the back as quick as they want, right? My point is though, like I think the voluntary hardship, the it's not even that hard, dude, just to be a little bit hot when you put on a weighted vest and go out and walk. But it's just the kind of like as you said, the practice of regularly doing it. So then whatever the next hard thing is that I'm not planning for or I don't know what it's going to be. I'm good. Like I'll get through this. I got this. I think that's really what it's all about.
yeah. And I'll tell you funny. You brought up my dad initially again, who has a huge influence in my life, and again, we can kind of go on along with that. But I'll tell you something really interesting about this, which is when I'm very dyslexic. So, and I had a lot of hardships learning how to read when I was young. And so I basically, this didn't get discovered until late because I was reasonably charismatic and could kind of fake my way through it a bunch. But eventually, things catch up with you. And by third grade, they're like, Sam, you're doing great, except for one problem. You can't read. And so like I had to go into like, and it was pretty painful. Like I had to go to some extra activities and like really like get way back. I had to go backward. Like, it didn't go back in grades, but it was a painful social experience. It was a painful in a lot of ways. And I remember at the time I was pretty upset about this. And my dad said to me then, and I do remember this when I was in college, third or fourth grade, he said, I'm happy about this. And I was like, what are you talking about, Dad? I was like a little kid. I was probably 8 or 9. He's like, listen, Sam, it's like, you've grown up in a privileged household. You've had every advantage. You're gonna have a lot of advantages in life. And you're gonna learn how to get through this, right? And I think the worst case scenario is that you just don't have any hardships and you're fine. And like this will teach you a lot. And I think with 2020 hindsight, it's tough. I don't think you want to like wish hardships on your children, but I do think when you see them, as thinking of them as opportunities for them to grow and learn, because that is kind of how you find great success and I think really satisfaction, I think is really important.
How do you do that? I mean, you're a wealthy guy. How do you do that as a dad for your kids?
So my kids are very young and I'm still figuring it out is the
Yeah.
honest answer. And again, I don't wish hardships on them. I just, when they come, and they always will come, right? You want to kind of have the right attitude and help coach them on them. Look, here's what I will say. I'm sure you're a dad too. There's this whole culture, especially I think in the upper middle class, around tiger dadding sports, right? And you're like, and for a long time I was like, this is insane. Like, what is the kids soccer? Like, what are you doing, right? Like, this is ridiculous. I actually think I have more sympathy for it now than I did before Because I think it comes from, whether it's misguided or not, a similar mentality in place, which is, if you grow up with built-in hardships, that's brutal, but you're going to learn lessons, right? And like it's going to make you strong. If you grow up with no hardships in a wealthy suburb in a nice place and whatever, you don't have those things. I think maybe subconsciously a bunch of these dads are out there manufacturing, hardship, manufacturing competition in kind of silly ways, but actually kind of understandable ways with that, like, maybe not even conscious goal in mind, right? Is almost the way I think about it. So, look, our kids are very athletic. They love sports. I see opportunities to push them pretty hard in sports and running and all these things. We do it and we do it with joy, and it isn't like a hardship, but like, I think there is some mentality around that I understand.
There's so much to learn from it because when you do have a, a lot of privilege or somewhat of a setup to where you have kind of everything you could want and need, I want you to lose sometimes. And it's hard to manufacture that, but sports does it for you as a
Yeah.
parent. And so volleyball is a big one in our family, soccer. Volleyball, you could win a set 25-23. So
Yeah.
that means you lost 23 times. You had to respond to adversity 23 times throughout the course very quickly. Boom, you just lost, right
Yeah.
back up, right back, get up first, like get up. And I think I'm biased. I played all growing up and in college and after college. My family, my brother did. So we're very biased towards that. You could learn that in other ways, but I do think that's a really good one, especially as a kid, because you don't have to be like super athletic to keep doing it. Maybe as you advance, you do. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really good one. Sam, I want to get to your story now. You mentioned you're dyslexic, and yet you still get into Harvard. I heard and watched other podcasts that you actually worked really hard and got good grades. You didn't like drop out and start a company. Like you wanted to graduate and get good grades and then get a boring job at a place like Bain, which is not, it's an amazing job, right? But that's what you did. Let's run through your history, starting at Harvard and then why you first decided to go to Bain.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, think about it this way. I grew up with like two narratives going through my head, if you kind of want to psychoanalyze it. One narrative was I had a very entrepreneurial father who, I mean, I think there was a joke on Wall Street that they called him the unguided missile. Very successful, did amazing stuff, but just like all over the place, right? And really into entrepreneurship and things like that. And I was around entrepreneurs, and it was exciting. It was early internet.
Wait, he took you to meetings and stuff?
Oh yeah, no, yeah, like I was in
I love
starting in
that.
high school. He was taking me, especially in the early internet, to this entire generation of meetings I had no business being in, but I learned so much. I was there for the day they IPO'd something like General Magic, which he IPO'd, which is like, it's basically the start of Android came from that, and like so he
Great
always exposed me
documentary
to a
on
lot
that.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, believe it or not, if you know that documentary, there's a
Yeah.
scene in it where they talk about the banker who took his shirt off to win the deal. I'm like 99% sure that was my dad. But the but yeah, so I had all this exposure on, I was very excited. I was, I got, I had all these fun internships. But remember, I was a very dyslexic kid who worked his ass off, right, to like catch back up and like get good grades and get into Harvard, and was kind of told to like check the next box. I did not slack off. I graduated Phi Beta Kappa, at the top of my class. I didn't get a Summa, I graduated Magna, but still, it's like, and the thing that became, I think, an interesting thing for my first job is I had these two poles. One is I wasn't close with him, but I did know Mark undergrad, right? And
Zuckerberg. Yep.
I was very excited about the early days of Facebook. I had actually worked closely with my dad. I'd been his lead, I think one of his lead investors, if not his lead, in 6 Degrees, which was kind of the precursor in social networking. I had a lot of thoughts and perspectives on the stuff. It was really exciting. And so I almost went and worked for Mark. The other job offer I had was the most boring job offer in the world, which was Bain and Company. But it was the gold check mark, right? Like people wanted the Bain job. No one wanted to go be an entrepreneur. People wanted the Bain job. And so it took me an extra few years of getting gold stars. I still was on the I need gold stars. I need to prove that I can get gold stars thing. Even though like I was very torn about it because in my heart of hearts, God, I love the innovation in the internet and what was going on. And I think I understood a lot more and had a ton more exposure than most people at that point,
By gold
right?
star, you mean like someone telling you like you're
Yeah,
smart,
you want the
Sam.
pat on the back.
You're good,
Yeah.
Sam. Yeah.
You want the adults to tell you you're good,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Because you don't believe it yourself enough yet, or you've worked too hard effectively and like been too trained on gold stars. And it's one of those things where, you know, it's a really hard balance. I know plenty of people who have no gold star instinct, right? They're just like, and some of them are wild. Some of them are really successful. A lot of them aren't because they just do not care, right?
Mhm.
Then you have this other class of people who like really care about good grades, right? They really care about like traditional measures of success. Candidly, like they just don't ever do anything interesting. And so there's like this interesting like yin and yang balance I think you need, right? And for me, it took a few extra turns of like get the gold star, do the thing you're supposed to do from the adult perspective. The funny part is I think Bain really broke me of that. That was kind of the final straw. And ever since then, I've just been kind of doing wild things. But but it
You
did take
needed
me
it though.
a
You
few
needed to get
years.
that out of your system.
I needed to get out of my system. I needed one more turn of the crank of being told by adults I was good.
So 2 years go by. I think I read or heard on the dot. 2 years go by, and you decide it's time for me to start something.
Yeah, I mean, so reality is a little more complicated than that, but yes, the
Yeah.
upshot is while I almost quit 3 times during Bain and had really interesting job offers from all sorts of interesting stuff, including very early founders fund before when it was just getting started, etc. I did stick it out, and then like quit on the dot with a friend from Bain, and we started a company in Brooklyn, right?
All right. What was that company?
It was called Drop.io. It was a file sharing platform. And it was basically, it was, if we're being honest, it was basically a Dropbox also ran.
Was
But,
Dropbox out then?
it was Box.net, Dropbox, and Drop.io were all founded relatively similar timeline. I actually don't remember exactly, but it was like somewhat concurrent, it was what I would say. And for us, the big thing for me was I was really excited about AWS, right? And the idea that you could build businesses on top of the early AWS. And it was kind of funny. There's another place where you end up in rooms where you had no business being, is when they first formed the Amazon Web Services Customer Advisory Board. I was on it, right? It was like a bunch, it was like the CTO of the MLB and like all these very fancy senior people, and then me. And like because I like I was actually, we were spending a lot of money with them. And like we were kind of kids in Brooklyn with a startup, which was a weird thing then. And so, you talk about wandering through life into weird rooms. That was a funny one to be in.
Hmm. And then, so how long until you mentioned Mark Zuckerberg decided to, it sounds like Aqua hire you, but what happened there in that story?
Yeah, I mean, basically, there's always a bunch of things intersecting. But Mark and I've always thought the world of him. We actually, again, we knew each other. We weren't super close in college. We became closer over time, just socially in a lot of ways. We always talked about the internet and what was going on and what was most important. And you know, I think it was in early 2010. The basic tone of it ended up being kind of coming to the conclusion that Facebook really mattered in the world, right? And what I was doing just didn't, right? It was like
Hmm.
it was not a terrible business. Like we were growing, we had customers. It wasn't like a nothing, but like it wasn't on a trajectory to be like an important thing, right? And Mark was just like, just come run the profile team. I really wanted to like reinvest in profiles. What had happened is newsfeed had become like the only thing that mattered in Facebook, and Mark wanted to like reinvigorate other services. And so, at a certain point, watching these things and knowing how much, I believe in particular in the importance of digital identity and where that was going, it was kind of like one of the things like, okay, fine. Like, this is clearly the right thing to do. He acquired the company. I moved out, took over the profile team originally, ended up building the identity team and reporting to him and running a bunch of the product groups.
So 2010 to 2014 was a huge growth period
It was
for
a
Facebook.
wild period.
Wild period. You're right in the middle of it, making it happen. What are some leadership lessons you learned from working for Mark?
I mean, Mark is an incredible guy, right? And I think I've learned, I think I can go in so many directions on this, but I think the upshot is I had a blast working at Facebook for him in that period. I had a blast building teams and like I'm very proud of who we've recruited and a lot of the things we did. From Mark specifically, look, I think there's a few things that come to mind. One is I'll go back to joy. The guy is joyful,
Hmm.
right? And like people I think miss this about it. It's like he loves what he's building. He loves the game of it. He loves the whole 9 yards. Like it's not, people are always like, well, Mark's gonna retire. And like, I don't think so. Like I think Mark actually loves what he's doing, and I think he has a lot of fun with it. And I think just bringing that kind of he's deeply competitive. He's deeply joyful, and like that is infectious. And that style of leadership, I think, is amazing. And so I think that's like a really important, authentic place to lead from. It's also just like, look, I mean, I think that Facebook in that era was probably one of the greatest concentrations of talent in like the history of the world, right? I don't mean this myself, I got to be along for the ride, but you just look at it, there's all these factors that came to play. that had to do with the dot-com crash and kind of the early internet and things like that. It's like you just looked around the room, you're like, it's yeah, Mark is an incredible leader, but like one of the most important things is just the setup, which he obviously put together and leads. Like this is like an incredible team, right? And I think that that's something you just can't undercount when you're working at that scale.
You mentioned the word joy a number of times. You, your dad, the people you like to hire. With that said, there are a lot of examples of people who have this healthy chip on their, maybe not healthy actually, but they have a chip on their shoulder and that propels them to win 7 Super Bowls like Tom Brady or Jacoby or MJ getting cut
Sure.
in his Hall of Fame speech. He's just talking about all the slights and he's the greatest ever. I know I'm leaning on sports, but this happens in business too.
It
So
does.
how do you balance this dichotomy? On one side, this joyful person who does it out of love and care and joy, but maybe because I sense Mark maybe has both, and maybe you do. I don't know others. I sense more joy out of you. What about having that chip? Let's say I'm going to prove you wrong. I can do the thing that people don't think I can do.
So for what it's worth, I think like again, as I said, there's seasons for things.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty hard to argue that Mark has to prove anything to anyone at this point,
Right.
right? Is what I would say. So I think and like I think that's like the joy is the long-term one that keeps you in the game in a lot of ways. Like look, I love a competitive chip. I think revenge companies can be great, but like let's talk about like I would argue that like Rippling is probably one of the world's great revenge companies, right? Parker, right? I don't know if how much you know the story and
Oh
like
yeah,
Parker,
I know the story very well. Yeah, my
but like
wife actually works there.
got it. So like Parker's awesome.
Yes.
Parker's a joyful guy, right? Like, and I actually think that's kind of one of the great tricks of a lot of these things is like, it's not clear to me that like that competitive spirit chip on your shoulder thing and joy can't go hand in hand,
Hmm.
right? There might be places where like one dominates. And like there are companies that are, I think, I'm not going to name names, but I think you can look across the universe and be like, that seems like kind of like a mean company, if that makes sense. Like that's a company that's run out of like anger and fear versus one that's run from like a place. It's like this is like Star Wars 101. It's like the light side and the dark side of the Force. But there's some like deep truth to it, which is like the anger is very powerful in a moment. Michael Jordan can come up with reasons that his immediate enemy in a game like slighted him that are ridiculous to motivate him like with a little bit of extra pizzazz. Fine. But I just don't think it's like sustaining, right? And so I think for me it's like the long-term success is sure you can have chips and be competitive. There's nothing wrong with wanting to win. In fact, I actually think you have to come up with reasons why you want to win that are outsized, or you just like life's too big and long. I
Yeah.
face this personally. There's a lot of things I've been successful in. I'm proud of a lot of the work I've done, but like it is a question of like, well, what am I doing right now? You know what I mean? Like I can try to find another Solana. That'd feel nice, but like, does that really matter? How do you think about that, right?
Yeah. Can you tell the Solana story? Was that like a 2,000% return or something insane like that? What happened
Yeah,
there?
I put in about $400,000. I actually looked this up at one point. I was the third person to send them a check.
Was this individually done or was this with
No,
a
no, through the
fund?
fund. I would
Okay.
be insanely rich if it would just
I
been
was going to
individually
say,
done.
nice
But
if so. But anyway, okay,
it's
go ahead.
still done just fine. I wouldn't worry about it. But
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, like that was a great example of like, that was $400,000. We exited to our LPs, who at some point you have to pay them back about 2,000 times their money. If you held it, it'd be a lot more, right? But basically, we put in call it on like a 20 post, and like the thing's worth $100 billion today in 5 years, right, or whatever the timeline is. It's pretty wild. Here's the thing about that. One, you got to ask the question of these things are all serendipitous in a lot of ways. The way I ended up doing that deal was the intersection of two very distinct things at the same time. One was just the idea of I really believe there's room for like an ETH killer, right? Or something that's not ETH that's going to win. I've been around the crypto world since a relatively early period. I was a personal seed investor in Ripple. I had done Bitcoin very early personally. I had been the first investor and really the only investor for quite some time in Venmo. So I had some experience in like perspective on the payment space. But then there, you think about these narratives, like we hit this point. I was like, there's gonna be something that takes some of the ideas of Ethereum and does it better. And so we were looking for that, right? And I was looking for that. And Solana wasn't the only one we did. We also did Algorand early and a few others, a lot of which were successful, but nothing like Solana. So that I'm looking for that. And then at the same time, people and relationships matter.
Mhm.
And the reason I ended up doing Solana, right, was actually because of Raj Gokul, right? And Raj is someone, believe it or not, I had originally met because I was trying to recruit him to work at Facebook years and years earlier. I really liked him. Didn't work out, but like I followed him through like three other startups he did all over the place. And I was like, we never invested. I never invested in them. I wasn't quite there, but I really liked him. And then I would run into him at a crazy crypto meetup, and he's like, I have a new company, and it's the theme you love. And I've always liked Raj and believed in him. And it kind of all came together in like a really serendipitous moment. And so you think that's kind of, how that one played out. And like it wasn't a straight line. I think this goes back to the whole like be joyful, but it's always in ups and downs. Like I remember running into the founders a little bit before they launched, or right after even, and they had launched the thing. They didn't know what it was for. It was like all this, and like they had gained a bunch of weight. They looked like shit. It was like clearly a very rough moment for them. But they're fundamentally joyful people doing a joyful thing and expressing ideas they're excited about. And it's not the only factor. Like there's a bunch of other stuff at play, but it matters.
So I want to reference an interview you did. I don't remember how long ago it was, with something that I've picked up after doing this podcast for 10 plus years. I'm asked frequently, maybe during Q&As of keynotes or something, like, what is the one thing? Like, what is the one thing you've learned from all of these brilliant people? What is it? And there isn't one thing. There's a million things, right? I've written multiple books about those things. But if you force me to say one of them, I'll say, you know what? And this isn't going to be as inspiring as you're hoping. Nobody knows what they're doing. We are all figuring it out as we go. And I know you said something
100%.
similar to this. Now that you're more into the world beyond Bain and all your life, I just love to hear you kind of riff on that.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. That was the thing for me at Bain is you go and I still had reverence for these big things. And like, you worked you're not supposed to say the names, but like I went and like optimized the peanut M&M line in Hackettstown, New Jersey, and you work with these big fancy companies and you're like, you guys have no idea what you're doing, right? Like, and like that's very freeing because like
Yep.
once you realize no
It's
one knows what
inspiring. It's very
it's
inspiring.
fine.
Yeah.
Well, you can take it one of two ways. You can take it very cynically. That's the wrong lesson to take. The other is be like, oh wow, that means I'm good. I can figure this stuff out. And the people who are really successful, look, it's tough because you don't want to say it's all random. It's not, right? Like it's not random. Like the people who are the most successful people in the world, it's not like they just got lucky, right? That's not the right way to think about it. But if you spend enough time in rooms with them for long enough, you realize they're wrong about all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
They've got all sorts of weaknesses themselves, and like that's cool. That's being human, right? It is these, but there are a few key traits where like it's a tough thing to balance. And I think this is the thing with so I'm like a professional seed investor, right? Like what I do is I want to go and find things super early, help people form the businesses, be their first check. You're analyzing the people and the space and not much else. And you know what the thing is about seed investing? You're mostly wrong. You
Mm-hmm.
mostly lose money. It's the only type of finance in the world where like you're usually losing money, right? Because and like it's a very interesting discipline as a result. And I think, when you do that enough, what you start to realize is like there is random walk to it, right? 100%. You can't control everything. You shouldn't even try to. That can make you quite cynical, right? Because it's kind of like it's almost like you're playing a sports game where like you score goals, but the number of points you score is almost random, right? Like, and so like, and someone's like, oh my God, that person has 100 points. And you're like, yeah, like they scored a goal that happened to be a 100 point goal. Like they're not better. Like, so there's this weird thing of like competing in something with so much randomness in it, if that makes sense. But if you can embrace that and embrace what it is, it's great, But it is a tough thing to kind of balance, right? To be like, I want to work hard, I care about it. It's not all random, but there's a lot of randomness to it.
You want to be the first check. You want to be in super early. Like, what does your day to day look like? Because you can't just like kind of follow the crowd or the other institutional investors. You're getting in before all of those guys get in. So, like, what
Yeah.
does your normal day look like?
And I'd say not only that, but I'm like a real snob about it, Ryan, right? Like, which is like, if other people want to do deals, like I don't want to do them. Like, it's like an ego thing as much as anything else. I'm like, well, just go get the money from them. They'll pay more, and like, I don't want to be like, it's. I think one of the most insulting things you can call someone is like a market participant,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's like incredibly insulting. I mean, like, what does that mean? It's like I spent a lot of time programming in the last month, and I've been having a lot of fun doing it. I write a lot. I've come to the conclusion that one of the best ways to learn things is to post wrong things on the internet and let people correct you, right? Like I think it's like this constant conversation and exploration, trying to find interesting people and interesting ideas. And that's kind of how I look at it is like I almost joke sometimes that I feel like a tenured professor of capitalism, right? Which is like I don't I'm responsible to make a lot of money over the long term by being very right every once in a while with permission to be wrong all the time. And it's really fun. It's not, there are ups and downs to it, of course, there's challenges to it, but I think when you're like, what's my day? It's like I meet with some people, I read some stuff, I write some stuff, I come up with an idea and explore how to do it or program it or design something. Like it's a very weird job that way.
You are you partially why you're shipping work online? I mean, I've read a ton of it. Really good writer. Not surprising given like just the way that you've operated. Are you just trying to draw people to you? Is that part of it? Are you trying to create this magnetic effect for drawing the types of people that are down with your style of writing and ideas to come to you with ideas, or how does it work?
All of the above. I mean, like, I think
Yeah.
one of the important things is like, it's not just about drawing people to you. In fact, I actually think it's just as important to push people away,
Yep.
right? I'm not trying to be like David Beckham. I don't want to be loved by everyone, right? Like, in fact, I'd really like to be not liked by the people that I don't want to work with
Mm-hmm.
because it's just too much volume. Like the internet's infinite. People just yell. Like, so the question is like, how do you create? And I think the way you do that is just by being really authentically yourself and
Yes.
like being unafraid. And then, the beauty of the internet is just so big, the right people find you and the right people engage you, and you kind of go back and forth with them, and that leads you to other interesting people, and you just have to be like voracious and open. I'll be totally honest with you, Ryan. Like one thing I've had a little bit of a struggle with, I think, recently is in some ways, like because some of the stuff I've written over time or whatever has gone more viral, or things I've done have gotten like kind of, it's actually made my screening harder because all of a sudden there's a bunch of people who like want to chat who like maybe aren't perfect targets. We're like having a slightly more specific profile in the venture capital community for what I do. It was like it's a better screen. So I'm trying to figure out how like navigate that, right? Like all of a sudden like my DMs are like destroyed in a way that they weren't destroyed 2 years ago. And it's a solvable problem, to be clear. But what are you writing and why are you writing? It's like there's a bunch of stuff I do explicitly and implicitly. And yes, I do want to attract the right people that get it and makes sense for me, that like they're going to provide the type of engagement that's going to be professionally rewarding and personally rewarding. But yeah, man, it's also about like explicitly pushing away the other stuff because otherwise you can't find it.
Well, I wonder too. I like the ideas. I like to hear the stories behind the naming of things. And when you think about Silicon Valley or being out in San Francisco where you are, you hear about speed. Let's go fast, move fast, and break things. You worked at that company, right? And yet, the name of your company is the opposite of that, right? It's slow. What made you choose Slow Ventures?
Well, I'll start with first of all, you think about like move fast and break things. Move fast and break things was an awesome marketing message because it definitely attracted who you wanted and not who you didn't. There's a lot of people who back then would be like, "Oh, I don't want to break things." Great, you shouldn't work at Facebook in that era, right? Maybe now, maybe when it's build solid infrastructure, right? It's like a different evolution of what they need. But like, great screen, right? Slow ventures. Look, there's the there's a reason the name is stuck, which is it's funny, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like we have a growth fund that you can call slow growth. Like that's hilarious, right? And if like you think that's funny, then that's good. If you think that's stupid or like don't get the joke, then we don't want to talk to you, right? It's the same thing like if you've gone to I'm very proud of our website, right?
Yeah.
Which every once in a while someone joins our team and they're like, we need to change the website. And I'm like, absolutely not. You don't get it, right? Which is the website is like me and my two partners, and we're all in tuxes, and it looks like a law firm website. And it's like, that's on purpose. If you don't think that's funny, then like you're not who we want to invest in. And so I do think that those are like kind of the types of things you have to do. And that Slow Ventures as a name is just like, yeah, that's hilarious.
Well, I like the idea of taking the work really seriously, but not yourself, right? Like you
Well,
could tell,
yeah,
and part of had one of your fellow employees, Jack Rains, on the podcast,
hilarious guy.
and right, and Jack's. I'm guessing you probably learned of him through Young Money, maybe reading some of his blog posts, and he's really, really funny, and it's hard to do that. And so I'm guessing your website, your ethos, the way that you guys are, you was attractive to him, and vice versa, with this like LinkedIn trolling type posts and all of that stuff had to be like a almost seems like a perfect match.
Yeah, there's a lot that's there. I mean, I think also it's just look, you know, especially in venture capital, the amount of work you do has like nothing to do with how good you are and the outcomes, right? And so like there are these people out there who like they emulate hustle porn culture, or they're like I'm a VC and I'm working so hard, and you're like, you're missing the point, right? Like, it's not like that's not how this works, right? And so again, it goes back to like understanding like, how it does work and like kind of being on the inside of that, right? And like kind of being confident enough to like exude that, and like kind of put that out into the world.
Well, also part of slow ventures is that you've written on your website that big things take time.
They do.
And it shows like your, I assume, your willingness to be with you, right?
Yeah.
To be with you. So can you talk more about that ethos of we have this understanding that it's not going to happen tomorrow, that this stuff takes time.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, every once in a while, like once a decade, something just clicks, right? And it actually does happen very quickly, right? I would argue that, like, Facebook was my closest experience to that. Like, we were just like, oh my God, this just works, right? Like for a whole bunch of, even that was an incredible, ride from the early days, having watched it, from like a privileged seat, but like as an outsider, it's like, but look, that was like a pretty pure win, right? Like from that perspective, most things, I was very involved in like the founding of Venmo, right? Venmo like was brutal and took so many turns of the crank, right? Early. And there was, it's hilarious. I'm actually working with one of the co-founders, of Venmo now on a new app, right? Which is like 16 iterations in the making, right? And like I'm excited about where it is. We'll see how it goes. Like these things, you're back. This is why again, like the joy and enjoying the journey is so important because I think that is part of the whole ethos is very few things. You can't bank your life on like the quick win, right? You do kind of have to put it on like it's great people. We're exploring a theme. We're gonna figure it out. And there's a difference between that and just straight grinding. Like one thing I see a lot online that I actually, it's a subtle distinction, but I think an important one is again, there's this like, we're gonna grind it out culture. That I'm actually less down with, if that makes sense. It is possible to sometimes grind out success at great cost, right? If that makes sense. It's like you're not that good, the thing isn't that right, but you're just gonna do more meetings and work harder than everyone else. I respect it as like an athlete. I respect it as like an athletic achievement, but I actually think it's a kind of shitty way to like grow businesses. Like what I think is much more, it's like almost like sailing, if that makes sense, which
Mm.
is like you get in your little boat and you got to find the wind and you got to tack around a bunch. But then once you find it, once you've experienced an actual tailwind pull from a market, a thing that matters, like things clicking, you want to go, right? It's just like it's going to take, you have to be patient about finding that moment, right? And sometimes I think, if anything, the thing you can take that's the wrong lesson from a slow ventures or how long success takes is just the idea that, like, look, if you're doing the wrong thing or running the wrong experiment, just stop. Like, don't grind it out. Like, that's brutal. And like, you're kind of missing a bigger opportunity that's two doors over, right? Like, is almost the
Mhm.
way I would look at it.
You again brought up joy, like
Joy's on the mind.
loving the process. And this may be way wrong, but how much of this focus on love and joy and embracing kind of like the day-to-day love of the process is the fact that your dad died way too young?
So that's an interesting question. Here's what I basically say to that is one, I would say that again, I didn't experience this firsthand, obviously, but what he had actually several very close call death experiences throughout his life. He almost died when he was 39. He had a terrible stroke. He had Hodgkin's in his 20s. And one thing he would always say is that when you have kind of these near death experiences, when you're supposed to die and you don't, it does make you reevaluate life in a way that's just very hard to experience if you haven't had that. Again, I haven't had that, thank God, but I believe it. It makes sense to me. And so I think he did kind of really embrace that. Like, how do you think about enjoying the moment and the day and things like that? So I think that's probably part of it. But it's also like, look, I don't know that that's like a complete answer is what I would say. I don't like he wasn't like always a joyful person. Like no one is. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Yeah.
I just
He's a
think it's
human.
like
Yeah.
I think it's a really important thing to propel you. And it's something I'm trying to remind myself of too, because like, like you go through cycles, you're like, fuck, this sucks. Or like
Yeah.
this is like not and you're like, wait a minute. Life's great. Enjoy this. Like this is like and that is kind of it's not just because it's a better way to live, right? It's also just I think how people are more successful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the optimists are the ones who change the world, right? Pessimists want to sound smart and sound right, and sometimes they are. But it's like, I don't want to be around that, man. Like, I sense like you'd be the dude you want to hang out with, right? You want to, like, who's really smart, but also is not going to take himself too seriously, but will work hard. But then, like, what's the point, dude? Like, what's the point if we're not going to try to enjoy this thing? You know what I
Yeah, I mean,
mean?
I do look. I think it's interesting because there are like I'm with you. It's funny if you did a poll around town. I think I am considered in certain things like somewhat of a cynic on things, and I do think your line is right. People say this a lot, which is like the cynics are right, but the optimists have more fun. That's totally true, right? But I guess I
The
care.
cynics don't change the world though. Like they don't make change happen, do they? I think it's the believers of crazy ideas that are
Yeah,
willing to go do it.
the problem with that, I agree with you, but I do worry, especially in this moment, that like people have almost embraced that mentality too much in certain places, to a fault, right? So like for instance, like there's a whole generation from my perspective of like people right now who are like see the future of everything in AI, right? And before that it was like the metaverse, and before that it was like, and they're just like, and I kind of get it, right? Because I think one of the things that, again, timing is everything. I think I don't know how old you are, you're probably a little bit younger than me, but maybe not too much. Like we were born at like the most unbelievable moment in history, right? Where like I lived right before the internet and I kind of vaguely remember it, but like we were like the internet native generation, right?
You
Like
know,
the world,
AOL dial-up.
yeah, the world completely changed as we were coming up. And like we're maybe actually a little bit like honestly, I'm like 5 years too young actually to like have hit it perfectly,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's like Peter Thiel's probably exactly the right age, right? Like I'm like a little young, like but like I caught it and like but the generational thing is real. And I think you look at that and you're like, oh my God, in our generation, in our kind of professional careers in this space, like literally everything changed in a profound way. And if you're born younger, you just missed it,
Yeah.
right, to some degree. And so then you basically are looking for that thing all over again. Like everyone wants every successive wave to like everything changes, the deck is reshuffled, and you're like, if you're being disciplined about it, that's actually not what's going on. But like, so it's a tough one because you want to be an optimist, you want to be in it, but I do think in a lot of places there's like people try to manufacture that where it's not to their detriment and to society's detriment. And then you have people like Elon who are so complicated, right? Because on one hand, they are the ultimate marketers of this mentality and vision, and there's power in it and value in it. On the other hand, like they do it in non-credible ways, which I actually think is like a detriment to everyone, right? Like it's like, SpaceX is an unbelievable company, right? But like we're not that close to going to Mars, right? And like he knows it. And it's like there's like a cynicism to like overusing optimism as your, tool for excitement, if that makes sense.
No, I know. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think more broadly, I just want to be around a group of people that have belief, that have joy, that have confidence, that are not necessarily that are just into the thing that they're doing and they can pour their whole heart and soul out into it, not to like the fake it till you make it types, but the ones who have optimism just in themselves and then people around them, that we're going to go and enjoy this thing and get after it, have fun, not take ourselves too seriously. I want to be surrounded by that. I got one
Yeah,
more.
and then I
Yeah,
think
go ahead.
it's a cultural thing too. I mean, I think the
Yeah,
moment we're in right now, like there's so much anger and fear,
right.
and it's just some of it's justified, honestly, but like I think big picture, it's like the wrong vibe for
Yeah,
great things,
agree.
right?
Agree. Oh yeah, 100%. One more before we run, man. Let's say you're meeting with somebody who was like you a while ago, recent college grad. They want to leave a positive dent in the world, but they're not really sure how yet. What are some general pieces of life/career advice you'd give to them?
So the only career advice I get people all the time who are like, I want to be a venture capitalist. And first I'm like, maybe, like, let's be like, I know it looks good on paper. Like, yeah, let's talk about it. But
Yeah,
my only real advice is write publicly. And I just really believe in this it's partially like you got to record the journey. It's partially you need the intellectual receipts, right? Like people are like, what's the resume? And like someone's like, I want to work at a venture fund. I'm like, cool, what have you written? If you can't write the check, write me the thesis and timestamp it. And like I just think like it's an incredibly important calling card, right? In terms of like what do you believe and where do you stand and how do you think about the world? Like writing is thinking. If you can't write, you can't think, right? That's really important. And then I guess the third factor where I'm like really you should write things down is like people just lie to themselves constantly. It's not like malicious. You will forget or get it wrong. Human memory is not actually designed for accuracy, right? It's designed for self-justification. And so I think there's like a real factor to being like writing things down, putting them in public space, standing behind them. You're gonna be wrong all the time. It's okay, right? Like I think and like learning that muscle. I think for what it's worth, it's also just like we talked before about experiencing pain and training on pain and being okay with it. Look, until you've been like deeply flamed on the internet by everyone over something, like you're gonna fear that, right? If you put stuff out there, eventually you're gonna say something that people are gonna lose their shit about, right?
Yeah.
And like I think even that is another form of just experiencing that's important, right? Like I gotta get blown up by the whole internet hating me at least once a year.
I think there's so many things I could talk about when it comes to writing, but one, makes you a clearer thinker. Putting yourself in the position of being a teacher is how you learn. It's the greatest learning tool in the world is to teach. Writing is a great form of teaching. You don't know what you think until you get out of your head onto the page. They're fuzzy thoughts. Then you write it and you understand it. Then you publish it and it works as a way to sometimes draw people towards you, push other
Totally.
people away. There's a million good things that could happen from doing it. I push every leader I work with, the ones in groups, one-on-one, all of them, write, write, write. I'd love for them to publish too, but write, like get it out there because you need to become a clearer thinker if you want to be an effective leader. And people don't want to do it because it's really hard and it's worth it. If there's anything out there, man, it's so worth it to do it. That's the main reason I sign up for books and like sell a deal to a publisher because now I'm on the hook, right? And now I'm like, wait, I thought I knew what I was talking about. No, I don't. Now I got to try to write a whole book about that thing. Wow, this is worth it. What a tough project. So anyway, I could go on forever. Sam, this is awesome, dude. I really appreciate your time together. Is there anywhere you'd like to send people to learn more about you online?
I don't know. I'm like at Lessin most places. My website's wlessin.com. I don't know. Find me. But only if you're like if you I don't know. Or don't.
This is great, dude. I would love to continue our dialogue as we both progress. Maybe record a round two in a little bit. We could even bring Jack on. That could be a fun thing to do at some point in the
Jack's a
future. It'd
character.
be fun to do, man.
All right.
Love
Hey,
it, man.
super fun, Ryan.
Yeah.
Nice speaking with you. Talk to
Thanks,
you.
man.